Yeah, I think we can start with our second panel about misinformation and disinformation. I hope you are all boosted by our coffee break and you have some energy before our lunchtime. And I'm also glad that somehow in the first panel, some of the concepts that now we are delving into were mentioned because developing multi-capacity and different capacities and new operational domains for NATO is something fundamental to address current changes and challenges. And so I think delving into something that is really pressing nowadays with the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine and with misinformation and disinformation affecting all the elections that we had in the last year, concluding with the US elections. And so I will not take more time, and I will introduce our prominent speakers today, starting with Akin Unver, who is an associate professor of international relations at Ozyegin University, specializing in conflict research, computational methods, and digital crisis communication. Since 2024, he is coordinating Deconspirator, a large Horizon EU project with 15 European universities and research labs tackling foreign information manipulation across Europe. He is also a fellow of Carnegie Endowment's Digital Democracy Network and serves as a member of TikTok's MENA-T Security Advisory Council. Previously, he served as a research associate at the Center for Technology and Global Affairs, Oxford University, and a senior research fellow at GARD at the Alan Turing Institute. He's the author of Defining Turkey's Kurdish Question, Discourse and Politics since 1990, and he's also the organizer of the Summer Institute in Computational Social Science for Istanbul and the founder of the Istanbul Twitter Developers Community. In 2021, was the recipient of the Science Academy of Turkey's Outstanding Young Scientist Award. Then our second speaker is going to be Gaiana Iuksel. Is an associate professor in the Department of Journalism at Istanbul University. She's a member of the executive and representative body of the Crimean Tatar people, the Mejlis of the Crimean Tatar people, a democratically elected body. Gaiana is also a member of the Audit Committee of the World Crimean Tatars Congress. She was the founder and editor-in-chief of the Crimean News Agency and Radio Ayat from 2005-2018, which primarily focused on the problems of indigenous Crimean Tatars. In 2024, she defended her doctoral dissertation titled Crimean Information Media Paradigm in the Context of the Occupation of Crimea, February 2014, February 2022, Transformation of the Media Sphere and Ukraine's Information Policy.
My first dissertation was about history of Crimean Tatar press. It was in 2007. Thank you.
Wasn't written here. Sorry for that.
Thank you.
Thanks for addressing it. Her work addresses important topics such as countering Russian propaganda in the coverage of events in Ukraine and Crimea, issues of freedom of speech, and respect for journalists' rights. And last but not least, we have Marion Sendker. Is a lawyer, diploma jurist, and journalist. She was born in Westphalia, Germany, but studied law in Münster, Rome, Stellenbosch in South Africa, and Cologne. She is also a graduate of the Young Journalist Academy. She has worked in radio and television and for online and print outlets in Turkey and Germany. She provides training and media law to German school classes and moderates discussion events. Her areas of expertise include Turkish nationalism, security and foreign policy, and German-Turkish relations. She is an alumnus of the Stiftung Mercator's Turkey-Europe Future Forum. So without any further ado, I think we can give the floor to our first speaker.
If it's okay with everyone, I'd like to move there because I have to see what I'm presenting. For me to be able to see which slide. So today, I'm here with my hat, being the scientific coordinator of this project called Detecting and Countering Information Suppression from a Transnational Perspective. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the ecosystem, European Union have different scientific funding streams. Horizon Europe is one of the largest. It's basically a large consortium project funding ecosystem. And the purpose of these Horizon projects is for a very large group of scientists to solve one of EU's big problems. So in this context, our project was funded under European Democracy Resilience and Information Defense framework. So today, the presentation that I'm going to do might look technical, but it's actually not very technical. It's just to give you a sense of how EU and NATO are scientifically and jointly trying to solve the problem of disinformation, misinformation, and also information suppression. The question of our project begins with "Can you shoot with words?", which is basically a reference to the evolving landscape of how NATO and EU have been trying to address the issue of information security. Hybrid warfare, gray area warfare, sub-threshold warfare. Sorry for our translators. I mean, these are even harder to translate into Turkish, but these concepts to define any form of warfare in which you don't directly kill someone is usually regarded within the framework of those hybrid warfare systems. So the European Union came up with a new concept called Foreign Information Manipulation and Interference a couple of years ago, FIMI, because older concepts such as propaganda, such as disinformation, malinformation, fake news, psychological operations, these have become very loaded and kind of tired concepts for a lot of ways. When you say disinformation, it automatically generates an emotion, and it automatically kind of disengages a lot of people. So FIMI, here on out, looks at deliberately foreign methods of using the information space in order to mislead, confuse, divide, create chaos, create instability in target countries. So basically, FIMI is usually a broader concept than just misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda, because you can also mislead and divide countries by using accurate information, but basically manipulating the perspective of it. You don't necessarily have to use false information to divide and manipulate countries. Now, this FIMI framework originated in the European External Action Service, in the European Commission, essentially, a couple of years ago. But since its onset, it started to become very, very popular, not just in the EU, but also within the NATO framework. NATO hybrid countering information operations. Then the United States Department of Defense and State Department really liked the concept, and they started to adapt it. Then Canadian External Relations Directorate, they started to adopt this, and then Japan did, and then Australia did. And so within just a few years, FIMI is no longer just an EU thing or a European External Action Service thing. It is pretty much a transatlantic and even trans-Pacific, when you take into consideration Australia, Japan, and South Korea are also being taken into this framework. It is starting to become a framework for EU and its allies and partner countries in order to create a joint detection mechanism for foreign influence, so that there can be a joint action against those foreign information manipulation attempts. And beginning with this, the aim of countering foreign information manipulation started to become an extremely technical thing. where data scientists, information scientists, informatics, computer scientists have started to flood into the debate, and they started to create these overly technical and overly quantitative ways of representing our information space. You know, countries that have more foreign information manipulation compared to domestic information manipulation. Countries that practically have, you know, false information in the information space or not that much. And very suddenly, this whole information manipulation debate started to assume discourses and narratives from war studies or conflict studies. So there are strategies and tactics in which foreign entities are trying to use the information space to conduct some form of warfare. There are offensive and defensive operations. You know, you attack a country in information space, you defend your information space. There are targets of information manipulation attempts, civil society, governments, journalists, you know, very frequently targeted. And there is a damage component to it. You need to create some kind of adverse effect in the other country for you to be able to consider that you have been successful. You either have to manipulate elections, manipulate policymaking process, create some kind of riots or protests in another country. There has to be some kind of visible damage to this. And European External Action Service, their conceptualization of FIMI is not just a new fancy concept. It includes, again, a highly technical way of using open source methods, open source tools in order to be able to detect and create early warning systems. One of them is called DISARM, which was another Horizon Europe project, which won funding a couple of years ago, successfully completed their projects, and now they're a company that are directly doing disinformation analysis for both NATO and the European Union. There's an open CTI framework for those of you who are more technically inclined, a cybersecurity event reporting and logging interface, and the STIX2 framework and event actor flow generator for cyber incidents. So when we say that the EU uses the FIMI framework, this is what we are talking about. We're not talking about a concept. We're talking about an integrated and interlinked framework of tools and interfaces for the EU in multilingual fashion across all EU member countries, across all EU partner countries, including Ukraine, Georgia, and Turkey as well. And there's a reason why this project is being managed from Turkey, because Turkey has been subjected to so much foreign information manipulation from all sides over the last decade that it only makes sense that this is coordinated from here. But practically, the whole idea is to create a kill chain, which in digital space would create an early warning system against foreign information manipulation and just kills it before it materializes. So, not to confuse you or just, frustrate you even further, but this, for example, is just one part of the DISARM framework. This is freely online available. They have a GitHub page. You can Google DISARM framework. They have a website in which there is a specific set of coded actions for the planning phase of a foreign information operation. There's a preparation phase of a foreign information operation, the execution phase, the aftermath of the information operation. So separating all of the steps of an information manipulation process and then identifying each individual subset of the actions that take place so that before an information operation becomes successful and reaches its final phases, you at least have some way of identifying an information operation before it materializes so that you kill it along the way. So our project, the Deconspirator project, basically brings in 13 European nations and 15 European think tanks and universities in order to support European External Action Service and NATO and US and Canada and Japan and South Korea and Australian efforts in order to create a universal framework of detecting and countering information manipulation. This is our project's Europe-wide spread. We have Georgian partners, Bulgarian partners, Italy, Spain, and other countries as well. So because the current European policy momentum is geared mostly towards detecting Russian and Chinese origin FIMI, and not really others. And when we talk to our partners in the European Commission and say that, there are other countries that are doing FIMI in Europe, right? There are whole other countries. And they're like, yes, but we understand that, but currently our threat perception ecosystem basically dictates us that we can only generate a Europe-wide cooperation only on these two countries. If you add a third country, even Iran, it divides the coordination within the EU. Not everyone is interested really in targeting, Iranian information operations to the extent that they're united in countering Russian and Chinese. So it's a political decision. So because we are EU funded, we kind of have to, follow that through. So just to give you an idea of where we are situated, there are 6 total foreign information manipulation projects that the EU has funded in the last few years. The older cohort, the Athena, Atakio, Selfex, these were FIMI projects funded by the EU 2 years ago. Our consortium, the Conspirator, Resonant, and ARM, these are the new funding cycle. All of us together, we form the EU's Information Operations Research Group, basically. And each project has a different advantage. So, for example, Atakio, led by the Swedish Psychological Defense Agency, they're interested in automating detection, for example. Resonant is interested in using data about diasporas operating in the EU to see how diasporas contribute to the spread of FIMI. Here in Deconspirator, we are interested in psychological and cognitive drivers of what makes a person vulnerable to FIMI, so that we identify risk groups and risk sections. So we have started in January 2024, and we're going to end in 2026. We are interested in analyzing the tactics of those who initiate FIMI, but this is Russia and China because the funding basically pretty much dictates so. We're interested in going into a deep dive into the Cold War, looking at Soviet, Chinese strategic documents, military doctrines, information doctrines, strategic speeches, in order to test whether how the EU understands this problem is really what these foreign actors are trying to do. Investigate the factors that contribute to the success of FIMI campaigns. Not all information operations are successful. Sometimes information operations become unsuccessful. So we're interested in measuring and introducing some criteria that will allow us to measure what constitutes a successful information operation, so that the EU and NATO can focus on what matters rather than just like dealing with everything and fighting across a very large front. Map out how FIMI spreads within the EU and partner countries through local networks. Even though we are studying foreign information manipulation, our previous studies have demonstrated that no foreign intervention can succeed without domestic help. These can be politicians, these can be NGOs, These can be business interests. These can be unwitting disseminators who don't really want to disseminate FIMI, but end up engaging with a very popular content, for example. So without domestic support, FIMI doesn't succeed. So we are trying to understand the interests, the incentives of local actors in spreading the FIMI. And we want to develop a multilingual database of FIMI incidents so that we can measure the increase and decrease of FIMI incidents in EU and its partner countries, and also NATO countries. This will enable us to answer questions such as, is Chinese FIMI in Portugal worse during election periods compared to Russian FIMI in Latvia during gas negotiations, for example, gas price negotiations. So that kind of a longitudinal, time-driven database is very, very important. My time is up, right? So we are at Cogito, Lithuania, Psychological Research, Center for the Study of Democracy, Sofia, Bulgaria, CIDOB, Barcelona. We have EDAM, another Turkish Istanbul institution, University of Amsterdam, Free University of Brussels, White Research. Our partners like to put themselves like in the middle and like with a big logo. These are our project coordination partners, also based in Brussels, but all of them are Greek. So we call them Greek partners. They don't like that to be called that, but they're Brussels-based. GRAS, a very big Georgian fact-checking organization. Groningen University here, Italian Institute of International Affairs, Ozyegin as the coordinator. Sorry, this is Groningen, this is Heidelberg. It's so small that I don't read it. This is Germany, this is Groningen, and Riga University in Latvia. So practically, this kind of a large question cannot really be answered. You know, a European information defense cannot be attained by only just one university, two universities. You really have to get like the whole of Europe in that sense. And other projects in our cluster are also like very crowded. Altogether, I think in this funding effort, we have 6 projects, give or take, all of them have around 10 partners. There are right now about 60 to 70 universities and think tanks around Europe that are trying to solve EU's and NATO's information defense problem. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Unver. I personally learned a lot about how we can practically cope with these challenges nowadays. So thank you so much for your contribution. I'm sure there will be many answers about that. I think I can leave the floor to our second speaker. Please, Professor Iuksel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'd like to use this place because I have a small presentation. Couldn't you kindly open it?
This is the...
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Dear friends, dear colleagues, dear organizers and guests, dear students, my name is Gaiana Iuksel. As moderator said, I am a member of the representative and executive body of indigenous Crimean Tatar people. We were elected in 2013 before the occupation of Crimea, 2014. And of course, at that time, as representatives of Crimean Tatar people, we had a lot of plans, ideas about culture, education, political rights of Crimean Tatars. Unfortunately, after the occupation of Crimea by the Russian Federation in 2014, we were forced, our leaders, Mustafa Djemilev and Rifat Chubarov, and some part of Mejlis, we were forced to leave native Crimea, and nowadays we continue our work in mainland Ukraine and at the same time in a lot of countries in the world. And when I came, besides it, I'd like to know that I'm professional journalist. In 2005, we founded in Crimea regional, national media outlet, Crimea News Agency. Yeah, and we were very active before occupation, during occupation. And of course, when I came to Turkey 2 years ago, I was very interested in observing how the topic of the war against Ukraine is covered in Turkey. And I'm here as a citizen of Ukraine, first of all, and representative of indigenous Crimean Tatars. And I'd like to start with such kind of thought that, in my opinion, the Turkish government, the country's authorities responsible for foreign policy and security, such as the Office of the President of Republic of Turkey, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Defense, Intelligence agencies in Turkey, have a very deep understanding of the situation in Ukraine. They know everything, especially about the war in Ukraine, and we appreciate Turkey's efforts to help end this war and assist with prisoners of war prisoners, soldiers from Azovstal, Mariupol, the grain issue, prisoners exchanges, military aid, military and social aid to Ukraine, and the protection of the rights of the indigenous Crimean Tatars. But as for media situation, to tell the truth, in Turkey it worries me a lot. I would like to share my observation with you. This topic, after 10 years since the occupation of Crimea and 2.5 years since full-scale invasion, is no longer a hot topic here in Turkey. And it's not being discussed, and now it's presented in the information field, in news materials, at the level of occasional reports. I think this is wrong, because the war in Ukraine, it's not small, local, regional conflict between two countries. It's really very huge, great, historical, social process that has changed the balance in the world, security balance in the world, political balance in the world. And that's why I guess that we should discuss this topic more actively here in Turkey. And I would like to talk about Russian propaganda in Turkey from the following perspectives. Okay. Messages about Ukraine. There are several key messages of Russian propaganda about Ukraine, fakes produced against Ukraine, and Russian propaganda in Turkey. As for messages, you can see some of them. For example, one of them is following. It's a war between Russia and the United States, and it's happening in Ukrainian territory. And we can see some transformation of this message in talk shows, in discussions, in some speeches on Turkey media outlet. First of all, I would not downplay the role of the Ukrainian people, because if the people had not resisted, Ukraine would not have such position, strong position. And besides it, I'd like to say that it's criminal, and its criminal came to my home, to my native home. And my colleagues, my friends, all of us, all Ukrainians, we have to fight. We have to struggle against this criminal. That's why it's not an issue between Russia and the United States. And you can see a lot of messages of Russian propaganda. Maybe here you can see main of them. Ukraine is governed by a neo-Nazi regime. Ukraine is a fake country. The east and south of Ukraine were never part of Ukraine. And I'd like to note that this false, this lie, and For example, Ukraine is governed by neo-Nazi regime. This false and generous narrative is used by justify Russian aggression and undermine Ukrainians' legitimate government. In reality, Ukraine is a democratic nation where people of all backgrounds fight together to protect their homeland. For example, Ukraine is a fake country, and the east and south of Ukraine were never part of Ukraine. Russian disinformation frequently propagates this idea that east and south of Ukraine historically belonged to Russia, ignoring international law and the will of Ukrainian and Crimean Tatar peoples who continue to resist occupation. I'd like to demonstrate you some fakes about Ukrainians. Among these fakes, around 30 main claims can be highlighted, which are spread through various media and social networks. Specifically, Russia disseminates false information about biolabs in Ukraine, genocide of Russian speakers, illegality of the Ukrainian government, and other similar narratives. You can see two examples. This is deepfakes, this is video, and on one of them, this is false information claiming that President Volodymyr Zelensky decided to stop the resistance against Russian aggression. The second one is it's the so-called statement by the former commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Valery Zaluzhny, about organizing protests in Kiev against the Ukrainian government due to Zaluzhny being removed from his position. This is examples of Russian narratives and Russian fakes. I'd like to demonstrate you a special Ukrainian project, Stop Fake site. Russian propaganda against Ukraine operates in Turkey, and for instance, the fake news about fundraising for drone from Latvia, it falsely claims that the drone supposedly crashed before the funds were even collected. Additionally, there are claims that the Bayraktar factory supportedly ceased operations, and a lot of other, and none of them is true. You can see that is news, the one news from Turkish media outlets. The experts of Stop Fake media outlet try to understand that, analyze of them and demonstrate the false and lie of Russian propaganda. What about pro-Russian sources in Turkey? To tell the truth, I have a lot of images and slides, but today I'd like to demonstrate here briefly a version of my speech, and besides it, I don't want to promote all of them, but I'd like to share with you the names or titles of these media outlets. For example, one of them is Dik Gazete. On the Dik Gazete website, many pro-Russian authors and even Russian themselves are published. Some authors of this media claim that Crimea have never been Ukrainian and Ukraine must forget about Peninsula. Aydınlık and Ulusal TV channel. The Vatan Party, which promotes an anti-Western and pro-Russian agenda, is the only political force in Turkey that has called for the recognition of the Russian occupation of Crimea. United World International. United World International is a bilingual English-Turkish website, and its resource was closely associated with the former Wagner Group leader Yevgeny Prigozhin. Until her death, propagandist Daria Dugina also published her articles on this site. Oda TV. I have some examples too. Oda TV. Left-wing media outlets such as Oda TV also serve as mouthpieces of Russian propaganda in Turkey, spreading disinformation and fakes, such as claims about Nazi Ukrainian general Valery Zaluzhny. Tele1 TV, Tele1 TV, Tele1 TV, another media outlet in Turkey that broadcasts Russian propaganda. And here they talk about Ukrainian Nazis openly wearing their Nazi symbols and the Kiev regime that forbids speaking any language other than Ukrainian and oppressed the rights of the indigenous Crimean Tatars. Evrimsel outlet is also not averse to spreading Russian propaganda narratives. Media Gunlu, pro-Russian narrative occasionally appear on Media Gunlu website. And at last, the most powerful resource of Russian propaganda in Turkey is information space is Sputnik. Yeah, Sputnik. In addition to the Sputnik Turkey website and social media pages, Radio Sputnik also broadcast. I'd like to demonstrate to you the example of misinformation in Turkic media outlets. This is a title of article, this is a body of article. Yeah. Misinformation is the false information that is spread often without the intent to deceive. And it can get shared with people, pass it along in hopes of helping, not realizing it's untrue. For instance, the incident involving the plane crash in Belgorod region on 24 January 2024 is presented as one side's report without considering, you can see it, without considering Ukrainians' perspective. The news is simply taken from Russian sources, translated, and disseminated. And although the Ukrainian side, Ukrainian government authorities responded to the incident very promptly, Russia claimed that Ukraine shot down the plane carrying Ukrainian war prisoners, soldiers, without providing any evidence. Ukraine denied this information, but this is not reflected in this report. This is only one example of such kind of process. And as for Russian hybrid warfare against Ukraine in Turkey, Moscow employs various strategies to influence public opinion and Turkey's political stance on the Ukrainian conflict, actively intervening the information space. The combination of disinformation campaigns and economical, cultural events is aimed at undermining support of Ukraine and strengthening Russia's position. They are not necessarily media related. They compress various spheres of life such as culture, economy, and sports. I have a lot of instances. I'd like to demonstrate to you really action. It was in this summer in Antalya, this so-called immortal regiment. I don't know how to translate, Бессмертный полк, Ölümsüz alay. We can translate it, immortal regiment. And such kind of events were organized in territory of the Russian Federation. Nowadays we can see some of them in the territory of Republic of Turkey. And I'd like to know, we witnessed the occupation of Crimea. Occupation of Crimea many years before started with such kind of events in culture, in education, in different areas of our life. And we have to be very careful with such kind of organization. The second instance, this is 10th anniversary of the occupation of Crimea and the beginning of end aggression against Ukraine. And on the second anniversary of conflict, Putin's media outlets and some organization escalated into a large-scale and blood war. And the Kremlin plans to hold, at this time, series of open propaganda events in Turkey. For example, on February 24, 2024, the anniversary of the day Russian bombs and missiles begin falling on peaceful towns and villages in Ukraine in 2022, representatives of aggressor country are trying to organize a Turkish-Russian business forum in Istanbul, whose real purpose to facilitate the stop of international sanction. Here we can see concert of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Yeah, and in the day of the memory of the victims Crimean Tatar genocide, 18 May of 18. And in other days from 14 to 22 in different places, in different cities of Turkey. As for countering disinformation, here are some steps we can take to counter disinformation. First of all, media literacy programs. It's important to educate all of us, not only Turkic public, Ukrainian public, all of us, about how to identify disinformation and understand its implication. Critical thinking and media literacy can help the public recognize false narratives. The second one is balance reporting. You know about standards of journalism, about balance of thoughts, and Turkish media should strive for balanced reporting, giving voice to Ukrainian perspectives. Media outlets have made commendable efforts in these regards, maintaining a balanced and professional portrayal of the war. This should become a standard across all media platforms. And stronger fact-checking, as for me, the third one, stronger fact-checking. We need more fact-checking platforms that quickly debunk propaganda, all kind of propaganda, not only Russia, all kind of propaganda, especially Russian propaganda in Turkey. This platform should have the support of both governmental and independent bodies to ensure their effectiveness. And I'd like to finish my speech with positive examples. What is the positive in Ukraine? I can highlight the work of the INTV channel. INTV channel Interwork. The journalists working there present Ukrainian researchers and maintain a balance of opinion. First of all, the head of news service, Ahmet Yeşiltepe, he is a journalist. We know him very well. He was in Crimea in 2014, in very beginning of the occupation. And he and his colleagues follow many politicians and journalists, among them Ukrainian journalists. And his channel, their channel, give us balanced and objectively news about situation in Ukraine, especially about the war in Ukraine. Besides it, they have a special correspondent in Kiev, permanent special correspondent, Denis Birkay, and present to audience balanced information. And in conclusion, I'd like to note that disinformation is not just challenge for Ukraine. It's a global threat, and Turkey is on the front line of this battle. All of us. The outcome of this war will affect not only the future of Ukraine, but also the future of regional stability, especially for countries of our region, countries of Black Sea region. Thank you for your attention. I look forward for our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor, for your contribution. I think you provided us with another practical example of how disinformation affects our daily lives and especially sensitive topics and issues that we are facing nowadays. So last but not least, I'll leave the floor to our last speaker. Marion, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Last night, the German government broke up. And I have to say, it doesn't came as a big surprise to many in Germany because there have been rumors, and these rumors have been headlines in the last couple of days, and it actually started 1 or 2 weeks ago. And now I would like to just shortly do the what-if game with you. What if these headlines, based on these rumors, were not based on real information, but on disinformation? Just imagine, I mean, we don't know whether they're really based on information, disinformation, because it's very tricky to keep them both apart. But what if it was pure disinformation that caused these headlines, and now we have the German government breaking up and breaking down? So I'm telling you that to show you how important it is and how powerful information and also disinformation can be. And I would like to look with you now on on the reality in media houses, in newsrooms, and in journalistic life. I think that the role of information and disinformation has changed drastically in the world, because for a very long time there was not so much information available. I mean, and therefore it was more important, it was rare, and that's why it was key to just gather information. Just look at this beautiful city of Istanbul, where we are in right now, and which used to be Constantinople a few hundred years ago. It was also conquered because partly because of a leak of information. At least that's what the historians tell us. So information was really, really important, and that's also why intelligence services throughout the centuries have been working, or the main job was to just accumulate information and get the data, and that has changed within the last 10, 20, 30 years. I don't know, but in modern times that has changed drastically because information is not what it used to be anymore. It's available everywhere, anytime to anybody, and I think that doesn't make it easier. It makes life actually more complicated, more difficult, and because, the job is right now to understand what is information and what is disinformation. And as a journalist, I'm exposed to these questions basically every second of my day. And I see why the media has a huge importance in this field. We've just heard it in your nice presentation about what the media can do with information and disinformation, how important that is. I sometimes wonder whether we really live up to this tremendous responsibility, and whether we are whether we see this and acknowledge what we are doing. And I mean, of course, there are certain standard practices in every newsroom. That is, for example, fact-checking is something we do, or you have this rule that you always need a second source. But what if the fact-checking goes wrong? What if the fact-checking standards are biased? And who determines what a bias is in the first place? Or what if the second source is not independent from the first source, but you don't know that? What if there has been propaganda, there has been disinformation being spread around for a longer time, and even your chief editors are affected by it and make you want to write a piece in a certain direction? And this is happening not only in other countries, this is happening also to colleagues of me, and that has happened to me in German newsrooms just as well, because the tricky thing is, and I think we heard that in your presentation, Professor, that disinformation attaches to emotions. It wants to grab us emotionally, get us involved emotionally, and it's very simple, it's very easy, and it works very well, and it's very hard to do anything against that, and to present then information against that. So the big question is how to deal with information and disinformation in the newsrooms, and I'm very happy that this is a question that is being discussed in the newsrooms nowadays, at least more than before. And looking at these discussions and at talks to colleagues and also my own experience, I would like to set out three main ways how to deal with information and disinformation as a journalist in the media. The first one is, of course, as a journalist, I have to have contacts, I have to have a network, and that network, that context needs to be as broad as possible. I shouldn't just speak to the people that are close to me, that I share the opinion with, that are on my moral side or my ideological side or whatever. I mean, that should not play a role anyway in this profession. I have to talk to everyone and to extend that network there. But having a network, especially that kind of network, requires trust. So you have to be a trustworthy person, you have to be a trustful journalist, and you have to earn your trust too. And that takes time, and that is one of the many reasons why a lot of people say that trust is not big in fashion in journalism anymore, which is a catastrophe, I think, because it's, well, yeah, we don't have a lot of time, but actually we have a lifetime to build trust and to become trustful journalists and build trustful media companies. And that brings me to the second point when dealing with disinformation in the media. All these points are also intertwined with each other, and the second one is the assumption that everything is true and everything is not true at the same time. So what I'm saying is that the doubt is very important when dealing with information and disinformation. So from my personal life, when I came here, when I started to build up a network in Turkey, I once met with some people from the security apparatus, and I asked them, how do I know stuff? How can I get information? And what I really meant was, of course, and they understood that because they are very smart people, I just wanted to say, please, guys, give me the dirt, tell me something. I can use it, I can handle it. But instead, they just leant back and smiled, and they just said, Miss Sendker, don't you read the newspapers? It's all in there. Don't you listen to what the politicians say, what the big company bosses say, what the institutions publish? It's all written there. You just have to read it. And at first I didn't find that very enlightening. But then because of course, as a journalist, you read the newspaper, you follow that, it's your job. And so I thought, am I stupid? And then and probably yes, I was, but then after some time, when you change the perspective, you can start to understand that the information is really out there. It's sometimes in between the lines, sometimes in the lines. But the key is that you have to be able to assess this information, to understand also what your network is telling you. So you have to look at wording, at framing, at agendas, hidden or put out in the open, at interests, at which group is with whom, and when, and why, and at what time, and when, and all these little pieces of information give you a bigger picture, and that you can then evaluate. And that is something it's not easy, but it's very complex. And then I think you can start to tell the difference between information and disinformation, because you will also understand that every disinformation contains information. It tells you something very valuable for your topic or for what you're researching on, for the person who delivered that piece of disinformation, or if you say that this was disinformation. However, what makes the job harder is we have even disinformation being served to you with the purest and modest and best intentions. And I think this is what you just called misinformation, right? I had also people telling me stuff they really believed in, and they said, this is true, it is the information. But then somehow it turned out it may have not been information, but disinformation. So even informants can be disinformed without knowing it, and can be spreaders of disinformation without knowing it and without even wanting it. And I think this is, a journalist has to be able to sense at least the difference. So that takes experience, and that is also for me where the fun comes in, when you start looking at where is the battle between disinformation and information. Because you are, as a journalist, as media, you're exposed to this. I mean, journalists are being used. The media is very important. Some journalists, some colleagues know it. Some even take money for it. Some have no idea and think that they are just, very idealistic in their job and telling the truth. But then there's the next question, what is the truth? The truth to whom? Like, what perspective determines what the truth is and what it is not? For example, you have read that in probably in very high-class newspapers such as the New York Times or the Washington Post recently, or it actually started mostly with the beginning of the war against Ukraine. You had so-called intelligence agencies, reports published in these newspapers. And that is always very funny, I think, to be quite honest, because what is an intelligence agency report when it's being published to millions and billions to read it? It's not secret information anymore. I mean, anything that's written down is not secret information anymore in this age. So how can you know that this is valid information? How can you know that this is not disinformation? How can you know why it was given to you at this time, by whom? How can you know it was not just taken out of context? So this is something that the media has to look at closer, and some newsrooms do that. Others don't, because it's also very appealing when someone gives you this envelope and I don't know, but let's say they have this red stamp on it saying top secret, and then you're like, oh my God, I'm so important as a journalist, and it feeds your narcissistic self. It's very natural, and that's how the media very easily can also become a spreader or a super spreader of disinformation, even without knowing it, because you're thinking you're fighting the right cause, and you're confusing activism for journalism. And that brings me to my last point. It's values. I think sticking to values, journalistic values, is of utter importance and can be even more reliable than fact-checking. Because we have heard from you, Professor, about the FEMI, right? The FEMI initiative, and they focus on Russia and China for obvious reasons. But what if Russia and China use another country, for example, to spread their disinformation? Yeah, that propaganda. So there is no 100% certainty that we are safe of disinformation. So coming back to values, of course, trust is very important, I think. Don't break the news immediately just because you really want a headline, but it's basically thinking is also a journalistic value. Think first and talk with your editors about this. See the product first, not yourself. Be reliable. Choose your words very wisely, because all we have is words. Except for if you work for TV, then you also have, of course, you have images, but also choose them very wisely. And most importantly, use your common sense. Because when talking about disinformation, also fake news, this is not only true for the media. I see that a lot of people are not relying so much more on their common sense, and instead more on what is being thrown at them, and for obvious reasons too, because so much is being thrown at all of us. And so just getting back to common sense is, can help a lot also in the newsrooms. So to sum it up, the three main ways is first being trustworthy and building a network that trusts you. Second is know your network and your sources of information, and be able to sense the difference between disinformation and information by putting everything in the right place and seeing the bigger picture. And third, stick to values. And of course, this is not easily done. It's a lot of work, but as I said in the beginning, I've recently started to see something that for me is a silver lining in the newsrooms. While disinformation is getting bigger and bigger for us in the media, newsrooms are starting to feel more anxious about it and don't want to rely on fact-checking departments alone anymore. So these questions, how can we deal with this? What do we do? What are our values? Who are we? What are we doing here? They are being more discussed, and I think that's at least a good tendency that should, needs to be speeded up, of course. And then to conclude in a more general way, disinformation, as you probably already knew, but now also with this also speeches before, is a very important topic. There are complaints about disinformation, which are sometimes being used as justification. For example, the election or any election wasn't won fairly because of disinformation. And well, yeah, that may be true in so many cases. But then, as I think the English would say, good morning after supper. This is 2024. There is the internet, there's artificial intelligence, there is social media, there is disinformation, and there are so many people spreading it and working on it, and there's big departments on it. So just saying they use disinformation I think that that is not, we wouldn't live up to our responsibilities that we have, not only in the media, but also in general and for other institutions, if we just, put the blame on others. And I mean, the world has never been free of disinformation. It's just very big right now. So instead of, complaining, I would suggest that maybe even fighting disinformation as the only solution is not the best strategy, because it's basically a lost battle. Instead, there is information in every disinformation, and if we could more focus on that, every group that is dealing with disinformation could learn more about certain group interests, agendas, capabilities, and also hidden allies. So this could be a new source of information. And for that reason, I think that disinformation and information should not be judged, which is something we are doing in the newsrooms, sometimes more, sometimes less. So we're saying this is disinformation, so it's bad. It's false. But how do we know? Maybe it's not false, maybe it's not bad, or maybe this is, to whose perspective is it bad or false? And maybe this is just irrelevant, because what does it matter if we say this is disinformation, so it's not true, but it has already created a reality. We had that in South America with so many governments being thrown out of office because of eventually there was a disinformation campaign from, that's what they say, from the US, orchestrated mostly, based on disinformation, but then the reality changed. So is it really worth looking at or judging disinformation and information, or why not instead clustering in it in who said this, why was it said, when was it said, and just looking at it, just gathering it all, instead of, which is of course the easier way, putting it in these black and white boxes that we have. And my very last thought, if you allow, of course, what applies to journalism, doesn't apply to NATO, because NATO is not a media company. Hence, I was very delighted to see that NATO has been heavily working on their propaganda and disinformation strategy and campaign. And I would like to finish with an open question for debate, because as we have heard too, disinformation is a tool like a weapon too. It can be used like a soft power weapon. So my question, because this is a NATO event too, to what extent should NATO use disinformation? Should they be able to use propaganda? Should they be the better propagandists than anyone else, or maybe the Russians or the Chinese or something? Or should they leave the floor to them, because propaganda and disinformation is something that is not very ethical. But then on the other hand, you could argue, no weapon is per se ethical. And as we have heard before from you, Ambassador Darius, you cannot prevent the war if you're not prepared for it. So how much does NATO have to be prepared to win this war of disinformation? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marion, for sharing with us your personal experience and also some final suggestions and also questions that I hope would trigger some questions from the public. We have something like 12 minutes, maximum 15 now. So what I would do is we collect 3-4 questions, and then you'll have the challenge to try to cluster them and answer in 3 minutes, 4 minutes each, if it's fine for you. So yeah, we can start, please.
Thank you. Selin Yılmaz, Youth Atlantic Treaty Association. First of all, I'll be speaking as a young NATO supporter here, not someone who is focused on full disinformation. So my question is, take it as a young person asking for some help from you. I tried to ask ChatGPT, and my question was, is there any trustworthy news channels in the world The response starts with, no single news channel can be considered as trustworthy in all cases. Then it gave BBC News as the most trustworthy one. Then I asked the second question, can you give me some examples where we challenge BBC's trustworthiness? And it gave me directly 10 different examples on very important protests like in Hong Kong, or chemical weapons, or some other protests. So these kind of things, I mean, public opinion in general, especially young people, we are feeling very under danger because we feel like no news outlet we can ever think of gives us 100% healthy information. And we feel like our mentalities are shaped by the media outlets of our countries or even foreign countries which are very reachable for us through social media and internet. And this leads many of the young people to take news from channels like Twitter, which is owned by Elon Musk, and it was actively used to support Trump's propaganda during the elections, etc. So as a young person, I'm asking from all of you, how can you lead me and my generation into real news, and how we can even cleanse this image of journalism in all of our countries? And my other question is to you, this is an amazing initiative about disinformation, but how we can make it at the public level initiative, and what are the tools you're planning to reflect it to the real audience of this news, because it's our minds shaped. And I'm not an academician benefiting from this project directly, so how can I use these tools to benefit for my future career? And my last question is our hands already safe or dirty when it comes to disinformation? I'm asking from NATO's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hello, this is Owner Animer. I just wanted to ask what the determining factors of an information or disinformation campaign are, and especially when the messaging that must be conveyed by a party is somewhat dissonant. So, you know, for instance, Russian messaging in France is different than Russian messaging in Turkey, which is different than Russian messaging elsewhere. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. We have one question here.
Thank you. Heinrich Kräft, a senior fellow here at IPC. Freedom of expression, freedom of speech is a very important value for every liberal democracy. How to deal with media outlets who are spreading disinformation? You mentioned Sputnik is a very important source of disinformation here in Turkey. So how to deal with them? Marion, your last point, I think the truth is a weapon, and it's perceived by the Chinese and by Russia as a weapon. They feel threatened by that.
Thank you so much. If we don't have any other question, feel free to answer. We can follow the same order or the other way around. Also, we can start from the back from Marion if you want, so we'll go the other way.
Oh, it's okay, whatever. Okay, thank you. I will start with your question, very important one actually, on how to consume the media. It's not easy, and first of all, very interestingly, I would say yes, ChatGPT was right in saying that there is no such thing as one truth for the media outlet, and I think it's, well, this young generation is lives at a very lives in very complex times and has to use the media in a very different way than even when I was young and grew up with the media. So just look always at the board. Who owns this company? Who finances this company? Who pays the money, basically? Also ask, does this make sense, what you're reading in a newspaper? And like in one article, does it make sense to you? Is it logical or not? And why or why not? And mostly read more. Read, the more you read, I think that's the best. And just really expose yourself to, okay, this newspaper writes more for this side, this writes more for that side. Let's see, and don't judge, just read it and then well, look at what makes sense, and you will accumulate a lot of info, and also history is important to know history about this, and basic idea having of politics and sociology, and if possible psychology as well. But then I think you can get a broader idea and always be skeptical and doubtful whatever you read. So whatever newspaper and whoever that is from. And well, then very briefly on whether the hands are clean or dirty when it comes to NATO and disinformation. I mean, there are much more qualified people in this room to talk about that, but just one or two sentences. There is a propaganda strategy in NATO. Of course, there has to be. So the question is, I think, is more, do you think that propaganda, it's not called propaganda strategy, of course. Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? What is it used for? So, or even disinformation, anti-disinformation campaigns. How do they really work? Do they also spread? What do they spread? So I think it's more about the details. Then I would like to, well, your freedom of speech question. I hope I didn't forget another question. How dealing with newspapers, like you named it, Sputnik, for example. It's difficult, of course. We had this, you're German, right? We had this case in Germany with a newspaper. And I think in that case, you can only rely on the framework that you have in your country and what the constitution is saying. So if there's something against this constitution and it can be legally shut down, then of course it should be shut down. But then just change the country. You have other laws. You have not this great freedom of speech and information laws in other countries, so they can easily shut down whatever newspaper that is not in their interest. So this is a very difficult question, but sometimes I wonder how relevant it still is, because we have the internet, we live in a global world, so you can go to another country and open your office there and spread your news through the internet. There's VPN, for example. If you can't, I mean, in Turkey you cannot open Deutsche Welle, well, just get some VPN access, and there's some even for free. It's, well, discussable how safe they are, but you can use that too. And whether or not truth is a weapon, well, I would still like to say the same thing again. What is the truth? I mean, it's a very big question, and of course for us this is the truth. And we're sure about this for very right reasons. But on the other side of the world, it may look very different. So I think there's just keeping that in mind and judging less. Maybe the best weapon can be found in there. Thank you.
Please.
Questions, maybe I try to combine together my question as one of them about sources of information, about deal with some propagandist resources. You know, I'm 25 years journalist, and in this year, 25 years, maybe 20 years, I'm a teacher, I'm a professor of the university. And I guess it's a very seriously issue. I guess that the media literacy special programs, it should be programs of governmental educational, I don't know, strategy, if you want, because it's very important to teach, to learn our children, youth, another ages, another kind of ages, to teach all of them the media literacy. And very important in such kind of questions is sources of informations. Yeah, who is the source of this information? The issue, the subject of topic of this information. And I'd like to know, dear friends, that media nowadays is technology, and we are able, all of them, I mean professors, professionals, journalists, we are able to teach this technology, but it should be not only one or two subjects in university. Okay, I organize such kind of lectures and practices with my students about Russian propaganda in Ukraine, against Ukraine, in Turkey, but it should be great, huge, as for me, governmental program for all of us. As for Sputnik and other sources of Russian propaganda here in Turkey, as for me, Turkic media outlets should to use objective or maybe pro-Ukrainian sources of information. Among them, first of all, the Embassy of Ukraine. Very seriously, the source which share trustful information about Ukraine. The second one, Ukrainian journalists here and Ukrainian community here in Turkey. The third group is Crimean Tatar diaspora. You know that Crimean Tatar diaspora here in Turkey is nearly 3-4 million citizens of Republic of Turkey. Yeah, it was very great historical process from the end of 19th century. The migration from annexated Crimea, from the annexation of the Russian Empire, from Crimea to the Ottoman Empire, and we use Crimean Tatar associations and non-governmental organization, Dernekler. We should use all of them, and I try to monitor Turkic media outlets. Of course, all of them, it's impossible because there are a lot of them, hundreds and hundreds. But in some of them, I can see a disbalance of thoughts. Only Putin's fans, only pro-Russian experts, only, I don't know, besides, by the way, I don't understand how one expert can analyze everything. Syria, Afghanistan, Ukraine, Israel and Palestine, you know everything about economy, about social life. Nowadays, all of them are experts in policy of the USA. It's something unnormal for me, but okay, you invited the same speakers, the same experts in your broadcast, but you should to invite people who representative us another point of view. Yeah, it will be my answer. As for what is it? Okay. Okay, as for determining factors between information and disinformation, lie and true. It's simply as for me, if to be briefly. Thank you.
I'm really sorry. Yeah, thank you so much. If you can keep it like in 2 minutes, Professor.
2 minutes.
See you 3 minutes.
Okay. Let's then, start from the last one to the first. FIMI requires context, of course. That is why in the project we have so many partners who are looking at each individual European country's local reality. So it's not only enough to know the language, you also have to know the political context, you have to know the idioms, you have to, if you are, for example, studying memes, for example, on 9gag, for example, you have to, each country has its own political and social context memes, you have to understand that. So we basically delegate to individual universities and countries, because otherwise anyone from country X will not be able to study information manipulation in countries, Z or A and B. So that's why we localize everything to the region level. The other question, does truth exist? So it's a very philosophical question. Truth doesn't exist. So we shouldn't be chasing after truth. And when reading the news, I never read the news to get the absolute truth. I only read the news to get a perspective on what happened. So if I'm very interested in that topic, I read multiple news outlets and try to get some kind of multiple perspective out of it. But I think all journalists at the end of the day are constrained by time. So in any given time constraint, how detailed of a picture you can paint is going to be very limited. So I think that the most important thing for us is that we shouldn't be reading the news to get the absolute truth on anything. They're just basically degrees of how biased news outlets are. So you get a right-wing bias, a centrist bias, and a left-wing bias, and then try to shape your own opinion about things, I would say. as a final question, how people are going to use our tools. The chain is that we are going to create scientific tools to the European Commission. European Commission is first going to reinforce its own detection mechanisms, and then later on, when this project is over, they're going to agree with an NGO or a software company and then turn those into the tools that will be able to be used by you. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being perfectly on time. Thank you so much again to our panelists for their contributions. I think it was a great panel. And let me also thank IPC and NATO for organizing this panel. And let me also say that personally, I want to thank IPC for having me here moderating this panel as a Mercator-IPC fellow for this cohort for this year. And we had a lot of food for thought, but I guess now it's time for real food, so please, auf Wiedersehen.